Chapter 1 Unwelcome. Rain sheeted down over the refugee camp, turning the narrow alleys between tarp shelters into rivers of mud. Elin wrapped her thin coat tighter around her, the hood useless against the cold that sank into her bones. Her breath misted in the air as she stepped up to the checkpoint gate. The guards didn't look up from their data pads. "Name," one of them muttered. "Elin Mara," she said softly. "Human. Widow of Captain Darren Mara." The guard's eyes flicked over her file, and then he snorted. "Human, huh? We're full. No home placement for you." She swallowed hard. "But I have clearance. My husband fought for the Alliance." "Dead husbands don't pay rent." The guard cut in. "Move along." The rain ran down her face, but it wasn't enough to hide the burn of humiliation. She turned away from the gate. Behind her, the camp lights glowed like a promise she couldn't touch. Chapter 2 The Streets of Orden. The port city of Orden was a place of contrasts, gilded towers for the wealthy, rust-stained districts for everyone else. Elin wandered through the lower levels, past alien vendors who didn't bother to call out to her. Humans were rare here, and widowed human women were even less desirable in a galaxy obsessed with strength, productivity, and youth. She had no credits left, only the small pack on her back with a few clothes and a locket that still smelled faintly of her husband's cologne. As night fell, she found herself in the covered walkway near Dock 7, where ships came and went with the deep thrum of engines. She pressed against the wall to avoid the cargo haulers and kept walking, her steps slow, her heart heavy. Chapter 3 The Stranger in the Heat. The glow of a street furnace caught her attention, a circular heat vent, surrounded by crates. A tall figure stood near it, his broad shoulders wrapped in a weathered coat. He was alien, broad face, deep-set amber eyes, skin with a faint bronze sheen. When he saw her, he didn't look away like the others. "You'll freeze standing out here without shelter," he said in a low, steady voice. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted, her voice cracking despite her effort to keep it steady. He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Stand closer. Warmth's free." She hesitated, then moved toward the vent. The heat hit her like a shock, thawing the numbness in her fingers. For the first time in days, she felt something other than cold. Chapter 4 A Name and an Offer. They stood in silence for several minutes before he spoke again. "I'm Elin," he said simply. "Elin," she replied. "You from one of the refugee transports?" She nodded. "No settlement will take me. I'm not useful to them." His amber eyes didn't waver. "Usefulness is overrated." She looked at him, then really looked. There was a faint scar along his jaw, and his coat bore the patch of an old freighter crew. "My ship's leaving at dawn," he said after a pause. "I can't promise comfort, but it's dry and warm." She blinked at him, unsure. "Why?" "Because no one should be left out in the cold," he said. Chapter 5 The Freighter. The Iron Wind was not much to look at. Scarred hull, one engine with a persistent rattle, but the inside smelled of coffee and metal, and the warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. Elin led her to a small crew cabin. "You can have this one. Lock works from the inside." She touched the door frame. I can't pay you." He shrugged, not asking for payment. In the dim light, the ache in her chest softened just a little. She closed the door, sank onto the narrow bed, and for the first time since her husband's death, slept without shivering. Chapter 6 Shared Space. Days turned into a quiet rhythm. Elin wasn't much for conversation, but he always made sure she had food and tea. They shared the mess hall in silence until one night, during a storm at dock, the power flickered. He found her in the corridor, tense and braced against the wall. "Don't like the dark?" he asked. She shook her head. Raiders cut the power when they boarded my husband's ship. The silence after the engines died. I can still hear it. He didn't tell her to be strong or to forget. He just reached over and set a portable heater near her feet. The small, steady hum filled the air. Not silence anymore, he said quietly. Chapter 7. The Past She Carried. One evening, she caught him glancing at the locket she always wore. My husband, she explained softly. He kept me warm in more ways than one. And now, her throat tightened. Now, there's just the cold. Elin didn't press her to talk more. Instead, he took a slow sip of his coffee and said, warmth isn't only a person. Sometimes it's a place. Or a choice. His words stayed with her through the night. Chapter 8. Trouble in Port. When the Iron Wind docked at the supply station of Eros, Elin warned her to stay on board. But the stale air of the ship pushed her outside for just a moment. She barely reached the end of the loading ramp before 3 men approached, 2 human, 1 scaled alien. Pretty little stray, one of the humans sneered. Bet she'd fetch a good price off-world. Elin backed away, but they closed in. Before she could shout, Elin was there, his coat flaring as he stepped between her and them. She's with me, he said, his voice like steel. The men hesitated. The look in his eyes promised violence, and they backed off without a fight. Chapter 9. The Fire Inside. Back on the ship, she sat at the mess table, still shaken. They would have taken me, she whispered. Elin sat across from her. They didn't. Because you're not alone anymore. Something inside her shifted at those words. She realized that warmth wasn't just about physical comfort, it was about knowing someone would stand between you and the cold. Chapter 10. Choosing to Stay. Weeks later, they reached a neutral hub where she could have disembarked. Elin didn't say she had to leave, but the open docking ramp was an unspoken option. She stood at the edge of it, looking out at the bustling station. Freedom. Independence. The chance to start over. But then she thought of the cold rain on the refugee streets, the way no home had wanted her, and the heat of that first street vent where Elin had stood. She turned back. If you'll have me, I'd like to stay. He gave a slow nod. Then your crew now, Elin. Chapter 11. Warmth Found. That night, as the Iron Wind slipped back into the dark between stars, she sat in the cockpit beside him. The hum of the engines was steady, the cabin warm. For the first time since she'd lost her husband, she didn't feel like a widow standing alone in the cold. Elin didn't take her hand, didn't offer hollow promises. He simply adjusted the heater vent toward her side of the console. And in that simple gesture, she realized warmth wasn't about grand declarations. It was about being seen, sheltered, and safe. She had found it again,